everyone, and welcome to another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Rhea. I am your host, and I'm very pleased to welcome my two guests, Conrad from CrewPass. How are you?
Hey, yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Good to have you back. And a first-timer, Jessie Frost. She is with Crew Folio, the director and the author of the petition that has just hit the yachting industry in regards to criminal background checks and making them legislation. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So let's start with you, Jessie. What made you want to put this petition together? Why do you think it's necessary? And how many signatures do you actually need in order to make this go someplace?
I was a yachtie for over 10 years. I kind of went through my career experiencing and hearing lots of stories about the kind of safety issues that we have on board. And it was very much an awareness. And I think it still is very much an awareness for a lot of people. Some people are completely unaware of different situations and scenarios going on. But there's definitely a lot of criminal behavior and offences taking place that are just kind of hidden, kept swept under the carpet. It's happening on board. The person's dealt with by just firing them, and that's the end of it. And they go and move on to another vessel. And then coming out of yachting, going into recruitment and having these conversations on a daily basis with crew, I like to dig deep and really get to know the crew that I'm representing. So I have very candid and honest, open conversations with them about what is it that they've experienced that they want to avoid. And the responses that I get from those conversations have, in some instances, actually reduced me to tears, because it really is very shocking and scary to see the types of behaviours that people are getting away with. And not only that, then continuing throughout their careers. So it became very apparent that there is really an issue that needs to be addressed. And we knew about Crew Pass and things like that, but it's not a legal requirement, which just seems, as we've said before, very strange for this kind of industry that, you know, caters to such high profile individuals. So you're traveling all over the world, and it's just like no one's really looking at the characters that are involved. And I think the crew on a vessel is essentially the central nervous system. If you get one that's not functioning properly or it is a bad apple, it really affects and has a knock-on effect for the rest of the program. In a nutshell, I just thought, well, what can be done to really address these issues? And there are so many issues to unpack. It's not just safety, security, and criminal behavior, but I think really the biggest thing that can stop that in particular is to have this legislation in place to really add criminal backgrounds and making sure that we have a bit of a harder time for people to come into the industry and continue like.
Both of you have your feet on the ground. You're right there in the trenches with crew. Conrad, what are some of the worst stories that you've heard?
There's two that really stand out for me. One that happened the other week, and one that happened that really springs to mind a couple of years ago. I give regular talks to crews and the reasons why Crew Pass is kind of being implemented across the industry and the importance of it. Crew members will generally come up to me at the end and ask me, some people generally have like DUIs, and they will have kind of misdemeanors on their record from 10 plus years ago. And they'll ask me how it will affect their application. This one crew member took me by surprise. He already had a printed out report of his criminal record and asked me whether the crimes on his criminal record would affect his application. There was 7 charges on his report. I read the first 3. Now the first one was he was listed on the sex offenders register. The second was he had been sending illicit images to an under 18. And the third was he was done for harassment. I didn't continue reading the charges. That was enough for me to go, you would fail our checks, you would be declined. That person is now working in the industry and is aboard a yacht. And
It's horrendous.
The other story was a story from back in 2017, which actually hit the headlines. Most of these stories don't really tend to hit the headlines, but there was a stewardess that worked aboard a boat. It was in the US. And she was unfortunately raped by, I think it was the chef on board. It's quite well publicized, this story. And basically, he had previous for it back in Croatia. And she subsequently sued the owner of the boats and was awarded damages.
What kind of stories have you heard, Jessie?
Honestly, I wouldn't even know where to begin. I mean, it's all been sexual assaults, physical and psychological abuse, one that I've actually just heard about last week was a stewardess flew out to the Caribbean to join a vessel with herself, the captain, as it was a small vessel. She flew out there, and on the first evening, captain had a little bit too much to drink and invited himself into her cabin and started making unwanted advances. It actually turned out that there was a history of that, and it never really been taken seriously enough by the people that put her there, which is a real shame. So she had to fly back from the Caribbean on her own expense to get out of that situation. We've heard about the guy bumbling around the industry at the moment who has a history, and I think he has a criminal background of violent behaviour and assaults that is also taking place off the boat when he's out and about in the evenings, having a bit too much to drink. He takes this back to the boat as well. He's assaulted crew members. He's smashed up interiors and crew messes. He's created a very hostile environment on board. He'd been fired within 3 to 4 days on the last 4 boats that he's been on, which are all very big, well-known vessels. And at the moment, I know he's just been fired from one of them, and he's back in the UK preparing to fly over to another boat in Monaco. And to know that he's physically harming people as well on board is just quite wild to know that he's also a known offender in that sense. So you look at things from a recruitment point of view of, okay, we've got references and we check people's references, but why are we not hearing about these? And if we are, why aren't we as a community of recruitment agencies collaborating on this information as well and making sure that it is harder for them to get work? Because you do have to go through avenues to get on a boat. So these things should be getting reported a bit more, even if it's quietly under the table between agents, that, you know, you're really putting people's lives at risk if you're not doing that properly and vetting these people.
The problem is you're given references, right? And those are the most favourable people that person has to give a reference.
Clearly,
so a reference is all great for a character reference, but you are basing it upon the most favourable person they put forward. You're not taking a deep truth dive into them.
It's not factual. It's all completely unsafe. And I see CVs all the time where there's a big chunk in between the CV where clearly they've left a boat out that they don't want on their CV. We all make mistakes. Things happen. I've been fired from boats. This stuff happens. You don't get on with someone, whatever. But, you know, you need to be able to be transparent about that. And unfortunately, a lot of people are too scared to do that because it's quite a difficult industry in terms of...
Competitive industry. Exactly.
It's very competitive. And if someone says one bad word against you, it can ruin you, even if there is a very plausible reason for whatever it is that you did. If you slapped the chef with a wet dish, I don't know. There's a reason for it. But yeah, I think we do need to do a lot more in terms of those background checks because, like you say, I've called references and caught them out knowing full well that reference actually has never even worked on that boat and they're passing themselves off as the captain. And I know the captain of that boat, so I know it's a false reference. And there's a lot of that going on as well. And the only thing that I really see stopping this is background checks. It has to be a legal requirement, same as the STCW and the NG1. If we can make that a global prerequisite for entering the industry, then a background check absolutely should be the minimum.
The thing is, what it boils down to is the yachting industry is very different to any others. You're employing people from all over the world, from completely different backgrounds, and no questions are ever asked as to the person they were and what they were doing before they stepped on that plane. You're putting these people with the most powerful people in the world, their families, their children, and putting them amongst crew out at sea. There are prerequisites to an ENG1 that you can't have specific medical problems to be out at sea. And because it causes a problem when you're out at sea. Now, why aren't they doing these checks? You can't blacklist someone, but you should certainly be doing these checks to make sure that these people aren't put amongst others.
Do you not think that these yacht owners believe that these checks are being done, believe that the people that are on board looking after their kids, looking after their prized possessions, their valuables, do they not assume that this has already been done?
I would say they probably do assume it and don't give it a second thought. Absolutely. And I think if they found out, they'd be very upset.
So where is this falling down? Is it falling down somewhere in middle management because somebody just doesn't want to fork out the extra, couple €100?
Exactly. The latter.
I think if it was a legal requirement that was put in by the governing bodies, everyone would do it without even giving it a second glance. Yes, okay, maybe in the initial phase, it'll be a bit of a disgruntled crowd doing it. But once it's rolling. That's just how it is. That's the industry. And it just becomes another part of the process. And I think it's important. We have governing bodies, and it's a lot of people are saying, well, how do we choose the right agencies to do this? But you've got people like CrewPass who are doing it, and they're doing it very well from what I understand. So I think to get the MCA behind you, the ILO, the IMO, all the O's, to support that and write that into legislation and give a structured system of how these things should be looked at and a process. And I mean, you guys have obviously already got a process that you're following and what you do approve and what you don't approve. And I think, it's already there essentially to take and run with and just make it a requirement for the MLC.
It was interesting because I posted across all my platforms last night. And today I have noticed that on LinkedIn especially, there has been a lot of feedback. The wider maritime industry is all for it. Only yachting, that isn't. And the issues that they're talking about is the cost and the time. Conrad, can you address that?
The first thing, just to address, I don't understand why people are disgruntled by it. These people are having to work with these people, and you're literally living on top of each of these people. Why would you not? Wouldn't you want to know that the person...
Yeah, but Conrad, the people that are disgruntled about it are the yacht management, the crew recruiters. The people that don't want it are the people that actually have to pay it. That's it.
Okay, boiling down to cost. Okay, we've set up a model that allows anyone to pay for an account. Okay, an employer can pay for a crew background check. It's $199 and always flat $199. There's no extra fees. And that includes a full criminal enhanced background check anywhere in the world. We have a model for crew members to allow them to stand out when they're applying for jobs. So instead of charging an upfront fee, because I know that most crew members don't have money when they're looking for a job, we charge them £9.99 a month, and that runs over a 2-year term to pay it back when we outlay the cost of their checks. As soon as that crew member gets on board, the costing can be transferred to the boat and the boat can pay it off. We have that all the time. We had it this morning where a boat paid off a crew member's checks. So the idea is it's a full circle and everyone is safe.
And how long does it take?
It generally depends. The idea is if a crew member gets it as they're applying for jobs, the checks are already done. So as soon they can be put straight on board. If a boat was to order a check, it generally takes, we say 7 to 10 days, but that's just to give us leeway. But we can generally turn a check around in about 3-4 days.
Argument against that is what is the problem with that? It takes a week to do your STCW.
Exactly. And if you do it like we propose to do it, the crew members get it first before they start applying for jobs. Everything is done there, ready to go. It's quick and easy.
If you look at the bigger picture, it takes 5 days. But if somebody's raped on board, sexually harassed on board, or assaulted on board, they're damaged for life. So let me ask you, is it worth that £199 and 5 days to make sure that somebody isn't psychologically and physically damaged for the rest of their life? I would assume so.
Yeah. And it goes so beyond that. It's even, we all know that a lot of things are kept hush-hush in this industry. It's very prestigious and we want it all to be clean and pretty and everything's nice. There are so many undercurrents of horrific stuff going on that it just mitigates that extra thing of a bad story coming about that boat had that happen on it. And do you remember that happening? And that sticks and it sticks with them forever. There are so many stories of boats that you hear horrible things going on them. And even when they have new ownership and a whole new crew years down the line, people remember it because of that one incident. We just need to create a better environment for everyone, which then also has a direct effect on how the industry is viewed as well.
I think it just boils down to safety. You're a taxi driver in the UK. You've got to have these checks. Why wouldn't you have them working on a boat? Anyway, I think we'll get there.
I think that there's a very much a free-for-all feeling in the industry, and it's such a brilliant industry, and it's so good for the economies that when these boats go to little ports and stuff, and the investment that goes into those places, I think it's great in so many ways, but it is not governed very well in terms of, you compare things like Nautilus, for example, does all this great work for the industry at large, but when it comes to actually the superyacht industry, it's almost disregarded as a bit of a joke. And you see, we've got TV shows about it and all that stuff. It's very much looked at as this sort of inferior, weird plaything of the billionaires and of the world, and no one really needs to worry about it because it's just a toy. But the people on board are real people that without them, nothing works. And you need those people, and you need to look after those people and keep them safe and listen to them. And when there's problems that are recurring, you need to address that as an industry to stop it. It's quite simple. I don't know why people are struggling to get their heads around it. It's like, here's the problem. Here's all the conversations about it. Here's a funnel. Let's feed this to the people that can make changes and address it.
I think that the more that we talk about it, the more we bring it out into the open, the more that we market it, change will have to be made.
I just want to say this. We are making a change to the industry. We've checked thousands of crew members now. We were working on hundreds of boats. We now have boats that regularly order checks from us. Every new hire that they take on board, we will vet that crew member. And what's nice to see, we now have crew members flowing, which are being employed on the boats that regularly use our checks. There is a change being made in the industry. We are getting there, but it's definitely a safety measure that needs to be in place.
You have a few companies that are tied in with you now, correct?
Every leading agency.
It's good news. Things are moving forward. And I think that the more that the awareness is raised, things do change. When it's sort of pushed under the rug as it was 4 or 5 years ago, nothing would have changed. But now people are coming forward, talking about it, and it's becoming something that has to move into the 21st century, really.
This is why we're seeing such a big crew shortage as well. These issues aren't being addressed. People are getting sick and tired of it, and then they're leaving. So now we have a huge gap for experienced crew that just aren't here anymore.
I have to say thank you guys ever so much for your time, because this is something I'm very passionate about. Jessie Frost, Crew Folio Director, thank you for joining us. And I will make sure that all of your information is below this interview when it airs. Thank you, Jessie.
I really appreciate that.
And of course, Conrad over at CrewPass. Once again, we thank you for your time, and we'll provide all of your details below this interview when it airs.
Thank you very much, Ria.
You've been watching another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I have been your host. We'll see you again next time.